The wind blew hot across the dead desert. Sand flew in circles. Dust filled the air, and in the middle of it all, she was chained. The alien girl's skin was dry and cracked. Her lips were bleeding, her arms stretched out, tied tight to a giant wheel made of rusted metal and old bones. The wheel didn't turn fast, but it turned slowly, bit by bit, toward the pit of fire waiting beneath it. Her people stood in a circle, silent. Some looked away, some watched with cold eyes. They had called her cursed, touched by bad spirits, a shame to their tribe. The priests said she must be burned slowly as punishment, not for something she did, but for something she was. She had cried for help when they first tied her up. No one answered. She screamed, begged, kicked, but they only pulled the chains tighter. Now her voice was gone, her throat dry. She had stopped fighting. She could feel the wheel moving under her, creaking, groaning, as it brought her closer to the heat. Her hair blew across her face. She didn't move it. She was tired. Very, very tired. The heat kissed her toes now. Her feet hung over the edge. Just a few more turns. She closed her eyes. This was the end. She would die alone. But then, there was a sound. Footsteps. Not from the tribe, not from a priest, someone heavy, walking through the sand. The crowd turned. A man stood at the edge of the circle. He was not one of them. He was human. He wore black armor covered in dust, a sword on his back, and a metal arm that clicked softly when he moved. He didn't bow to the priests. He didn't ask questions. He just stared at the wheel. At her. The wind pushed his long coat behind him. "Who tied her up?" he asked, voice like stone. The crowd didn't answer. The priest finally stepped forward. "She is cursed. She must burn." The human didn't blink. "She looks like a girl, to me." "She is not yours to question," the priest snapped. "Leave now." The man didn't move. His eyes stayed on the girl. He saw her wrists, bleeding, her chest, rising, barely, her eyes, open just enough to see him, and in that moment, something passed between them. Hope. Just a spark, but real. The priest raised his staff. "Guards!" 4 warriors stepped forward with spears, but the human didn't step back. He reached over his shoulder and pulled out his blade. It shined silver in the sun. The crowd gasped. The guards charged. He moved like lightning. 1 swing, 2 dropped, another step. Another guard flew back. Sand flew. Blood hit the dirt. The wheel creaked again. The girl's foot touched the flame. She screamed. The human's eyes burned now. He jumped forward. His metal arm grabbed the edge of the wheel. With a loud roar, he broke the wheel in 2. Chains snapped. The girl fell, but he caught her in his arms. She was light, so thin. Her skin was burning, but she was alive. The crowd was frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. The priest pointed, shaking. "You'll bring war on us." The human turned slowly. "She's not your prisoner anymore." He looked at the girl. Her head rested on his chest. Eyes closed, but this time not from pain, from peace. He stepped back, the sword still ready, but no one followed. The man walked into the desert with her in his arms, and behind them, the broken wheel burned in the fire instead. The human warrior walked deep into the desert. In his arms, the alien girl lay still. Her skin was burned. Her body was weak. Her breath was slow, but alive. Each step in the sand was heavy, not because of her weight, because of what he had just done. Back at the village, they screamed angry voices, shouting priests, clanging weapons, but none followed yet. Maybe they were afraid of the human, or maybe they were waiting to strike at night. The sun began to fall. The desert grew cold. He found a small cave near the rocks and stepped inside. Carefully, he laid her on his coat. She didn't open her eyes. The warrior lit a small fire. He pulled a bottle from his bag. Clean water. He poured a few drops onto her dry lips. She moved, just barely. Her voice came out like a whisper. "Why, did you save me?" He didn't answer right away. He took a cloth, dipped it in water, and gently wiped her forehead. Then he said softly, "Because no one else did." She blinked once. Then darkness took her again. For hours he sat by the fire, watching her, guarding the entrance, his sword across his lap. She woke before dawn, eyes opened slowly. She turned her head and saw him, still sitting, still watching. She tried to sit up. He stopped her gently. "Rest." She looked around. The fire, the coat, the food. This was the first time in her life she had been treated like she mattered. Her voice cracked. "I don't know your name." He looked at her. "Name's Kale." She nodded. "Mine is Inari." Suddenly, a sound. Stone sliding outside. Kyle stood fast. He drew his sword. 3 warriors entered the cave, same armor as the villagers. "You stole her," one growled. "She was chosen for the flame." Kyle stepped in front of her. "She was chained like an animal." "She is cursed," said another. "She is alive," Kyle snapped. The men raised their blades. Kale didn't move. His eyes locked on them like fire. "If you want her," he said, voice calm, "then step into the fire like I did." The warriors hesitated. Just a second, but Inari saw it. They were afraid, not of his sword, but of his will. They turned and vanished into the night. Kale dropped his sword and sat back down. Inari was shaking. He looked at her. "You okay?" She nodded, slowly. "I was ready to die." He stared at the flames. "Yeah," he said. "I could tell." She turned her eyes toward him. "But why do you fight for someone like me?" Kale didn't smile, but his voice was soft. "I've seen real monsters. You're not one of them." She looked down at her hands, dirty, scarred, still trembling, and, for the first time ever, she started to believe him. That night they didn't speak again, but they didn't need to. Kyle sat by the fire. Inari lay wrapped in his coat. And while the desert wind howled outside the cave, she slept in peace, because someone had stepped into the fire just to pull her out. The sun rose over the cold desert. Kale opened his eyes before it touched the rocks. He had not slept. His sword still rested across his lap. The girl, Inari, was curled near the ashes of the fire, wrapped in his coat. Still alive, still breathing. Kale stood and looked outside. The sand was quiet, no footsteps, no smoke, but he knew they would come again. This time stronger, this time with more chains. He turned back and knelt beside her. "Inari," he whispered. Her eyes opened slowly. He offered her water. She drank, then looked at him, confused. "We're not staying?" Kyle shook his head. "They'll find this cave." He paused. "And I don't plan on letting them take you." He packed fast. One arm around her, he lifted her with ease. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. "I can walk," she said. Kale didn't argue, but he didn't let go either. He carried her, step after step, over hot dunes, across sharp stones. She hid her face in his chest, ashamed. "I'm just slowing you down." Kale didn't answer. He only kept walking. His boots left prints in the sand behind them, but the way forward was clear. The wind picked up. Dust scratched their faces. Kale pulled, his scarf higher, and held her tighter. Her voice was low now. Why do you keep helping me?" He stopped for a moment and looked down at her. "Because I've seen what happens to people no one helps." He looked away, eyes hard. "And I swore I wouldn't be one of those people." They passed old ruins, a trader camp. No one helped them. No one even looked. One man shouted, "Why carry her? She's cursed." Another laughed, "Human fool." Kale didn't speak. He didn't stop. That night he found an old structure, half buried in the sand, a fallen beacon tower. It wasn't safe, but it was shelter. He laid her down gently and started a small fire. She watched him. His hands were blistered. His back was soaked in sweat. Still, he never once complained. As he broke some dried bread and gave her half, she whispered, "No one has ever given me food." Cale blinked. "Ever?" She shook her head. "Only scraps. Only when I worked." He handed her the bigger piece. Then, "Tonight is a first." She bit it slowly, like it would vanish. Then she asked again, "What if I really am cursed?" Kyle's voice was calm. "Then I guess I'm cursed too." She stared at him, silent. And for the first time in her life, she smiled. Not big, not wide, just a little. But it was real. He noticed, and something in his hard face softened. As they sat by the fire, Inari whispered, "Do you think I'll ever walk on my own again?" Kyle didn't answer with empty hope. He said the truth. "We'll keep moving until you do." That night she didn't feel weak. She didn't feel cursed. She just felt human. And even though they called Cale a fool, even though no one helped him, even though the desert tried to break them both, he carried her, because to him, she was worth it. The wind had quieted. The stars blinked above the ruined beacon tower. Inside, Inari lay awake. Kyle was fast asleep, sitting against the wall, his sword resting beside him. She looked at him for a long time. His chest moved slowly. With each breath, there was dirt on his face, a small wound near his eye, but still, his hand was near his blade, ready to protect her, even while sleeping. She sat up slowly, her legs still weak, but stronger than yesterday. She looked at her arms. No chains. At her wrists. No ropes. She was free, but something inside her felt heavier than chains. Guilt. He carried her. He fought for her. He nearly died for her, and she had done nothing. She was a burden. Tears filled her eyes. She pulled his coat around her shoulders and began to crawl toward the door. Her legs dragged behind her. Every movement hurt, but she didn't stop. She didn't want to slow him down anymore, didn't want to cost him his life. The cold wind hit her face. She reached the doorway, one more pull, and, "Where do you think you're going?" Cale's voice cut through the dark, firm, but not angry. Inari froze. She didn't turn around. I don't want to cause you trouble," she whispered. Cale stood slowly. He didn't shout. He didn't demand answers. He just walked up behind her and knelt down. "Trouble?" he asked quietly. "You think you're trouble?" She still didn't look up. "I don't belong with someone like you. You're strong, brave, and I—" She stopped. Her voice cracked. "I'm just broken." Cale said nothing. Instead, he gently placed his hand on her shoulder. She flinched at first, but he didn't move. "You think I saved you because I pity you?" he asked. She nodded slowly. He shook his head. "No. I saved you because I saw a person chained like an animal, and I saw fire in her eyes." Inari's lip trembled. "There's no fire left." Kyle leaned closer. "Then I'll carry the flame until you find yours again." She turned her head slightly and looked at him. Really looked. His face was tired. His clothes worn, but his eyes were strong and kind. Kyle reached down and picked her up, again. She didn't fight it this time. He brought her back inside, laid her near the fire, pulled his coat over her shoulders once more. Then he said, "You are not trash, Inari." She stared at the flames. A tear slid down her cheek. "No one ever told me that before." Kyle gave a small smile. "Well, get used to it." The fire crackled between them. Soft, safe, and something inside Inari something long buried, began to flicker, a spark. She didn't try to leave again. She stayed, because for the first time in her life, someone held her like she mattered. Morning came like a warning. The sun was sharp. The wind was silent. Kyle had already packed their few supplies. Inari sat on a rock, her legs wrapped in cloth. She was able to stand now, but not for long. Kyle handed her a drink. "We'll head north," he said. "There's a hidden settlement, safe place." She looked at him, unsure. "For me too?" Kyle didn't blink. "Especially for you." But just before they could leave, the sound came. Drums, distant but getting closer, heavy, angry, slow. Kyle froze. He looked out past the rocks. A line of shadows moved across the sand. 5. No. 6 riders on large beasts. And behind them, her tribe. Priests, warriors, chains hanging from their hands. Inari's breath caught. "They found us." Kale grabbed his sword. He stepped in front of her. "Stay behind me." The riders stopped a few meters away. Dust swirled around their feet. One of them stepped down tall, skin like cracked stone, golden markings on his face. It was the high priest. His voice was cold, loud. "You run from fate, girl." He pointed a long finger at Inari. "You were meant to die in the flame. That wheel was mercy." Inari stayed behind Kale, shaking. The priest continued. "This human has poisoned your mind. Come back, and your punishment will be clean." Kale raised his sword. "She's not going anywhere with you." The priest didn't even flinch. "Step aside, outsider. This does not concern you." But then, something happened. Inari stepped forward. Her legs wobbled, but she stood. Her voice was soft but strong. "No." The priest's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" Inari took another step. She stood beside Kale now, not behind him. "I'm not cursed," she said. "I'm not your prisoner." Her voice grew louder. "I'm not yours anymore." The priest's face twisted with rage. "You belong to the flame." Kale moved, ready to strike, but Inari raised her hand. "Let me speak." She walked a few steps closer. Just enough. The chains in the warrior's hands clinked as they tensed, but she didn't stop. "You left me to burn," she said to them. "I begged. I cried. You turned away." She looked back at Kale. "He carried me, he fed me, he listened." Her eyes glowed with quiet fire. "So if I belong to anyone," she turned to face the priest, "I belong with him." Silence. For a long, heavy moment. Then, the priest roared, "Seize her!" The warrior stepped forward. Kyle drew his sword, but Inari shouted first, "Stop!" The warriors paused, surprised. They looked at her, then at the priest. Something in them hesitated. They had seen her dying. They had seen her weak. Now she stood strong, alive, with fire in her eyes. The priest screamed again, but no one moved. Kyle stepped beside Inari. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply said, "She made her choice." The priest pointed a shaking finger. "This isn't over." Then he turned his beast and rode away, furious. The others followed. Dust rose behind them as they disappeared into the hills. Inari fell to her knees. Kyle caught her before she hit the ground. She was crying, but not from fear, from freedom. She had made a choice, not for survival, not out of fear, but for herself and Kale. He was no longer just her protector. He was the man she chose. Night came fast. Kyle and Inari found shelter in an old crater, hidden behind tall rocks. The stars above blinked, cold and quiet. They sat close beside the fire. Kyle checked the map, in silence. Inari was quiet too, but her eyes were watching him. He had done too much for her. Fought battles, carried her, stood between her and death again and again. Now she could walk on her own. She could speak for herself. But something inside her said, it still wasn't enough. She stared at the fire and whispered, "You should have left me." Kale didn't look up. He just kept checking the map. I didn't want to, he said. She frowned. Even now, Cale finally looked at her. His voice was low. I don't save people to throw them away later. She opened her mouth to speak, but the sound didn't come from her, it came from behind them. A stone rolled, a branch snapped. Cale stood fast, sword out, eyes sharp. From the shadows, they came. Not warriors, not priests, mercenaries, hunters for gold, paid in blood. One of them grinned. Big. Bounty on the alien girl. And you, human, for stealing her. Cale's voice was steel. Walk away. They didn't. 3 charged fast. Cale moved like wind. His blade struck true, one dropped, another screamed as fire from the pit sprayed his face. But the third, he was fast. He stabbed Cale, deep. Blood hit the sand. Inari screamed, Cale. He fell to one knee, sword still swinging. The attacker stepped back, unsure. Cale held his side. His breathing changed, but his eyes still burned. Inari crawled to him, grabbing his shoulder. Her hands were shaking. He looked at her and whispered, Run. She shook her head. No. Run now. I said no. The last hunter moved forward, blade high. Cale tried to rise, but he was too slow this time. Inari jumped in front of him, arms wide, tears running down her face. If you want him, you'll have to kill me first. The mercenary laughed. A curse and a fool. Fine. He raised his weapon. But something changed. The air around Inari shimmered. Her skin began to glow, soft, warm light. Her eyes turned gold. Her voice rose, not in words, but a pulse of sound, like thunder. The attacker screamed as he was thrown backward without a touch. Kyle stared in shock. Inari collapsed beside him, gasping. I don't know what that was. Cale smiled through the pain. I do. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. You're not cursed, Inari. You're powerful. She held him tight. Blood still poured from his side. Don't die, she whispered. Please don't leave me. Cale coughed weakly. I'm not going anywhere. She held pressure to his wound. Tears dropped on his armor. I don't care what anyone says, she whispered. You're mine now. He chuckled softly and passed out in her arms. Inari looked around the desert. Dark, silent, but she wasn't scared anymore. Because tonight, she saved him. The sun rose slowly over the desert. Soft golden light touched the rocks, the fire, and the blood-stained sand. Cale lay against the cave wall, breathing slow. His wound had stopped bleeding, but he was still weak. Inari sat beside him, awake through the night. She hadn't left his side once. She had cleaned his wound with shaking hands, wrapped it with every piece of cloth she had. She used the last of the water to cool his forehead, and now she just watched him, hoping. Once, her people told her she was born cursed, that she would only bring pain, that she was meant to burn, but now, she looked at Cale. He had bled for her, and she had fought for him. She had saved him. The old Inari was gone, burned in that wheel, left in that village. Now, she was someone new. Cale stirred. She leaned forward quickly. I'm here, she whispered. He blinked slowly. You didn't run. She smiled through tears. Never again. He winced, trying to sit up. You saved me. You saved me first. They both smiled, tired, bruised, but real. Days passed. Cale healed slowly. Inari learned to hunt. She lit fires. She found water. She even laughed. One evening, Cale stood with help. He leaned on her shoulder. She smiled. See? You're heavy, but I'm stronger now. Cale chuckled. That you are. They walked together, side by side. Not warrior and burden. Not human and slave. Just two souls who chose each other. When they reached the safe town Cale had spoken of, the guards stared. A human man, blood-stained, limping, and a glowing alien girl who walked like she owned the stars. Who is she? a guard asked. Kale simply said, "She's mine." Inari looked up at him, and for the first time, she didn't feel dirty, she didn't feel cursed, she didn't feel less. She felt loved. Inside the town, they were offered rooms, food, warmth, real bed. Kale sat down, finally resting without pain. Inari stood at the window looking out. The stars above blinked like soft candles. She turned around slowly. "Kale," she said. He looked at her. Her hair was washed, her skin clean, her eyes full of strength. "I don't want to be just someone you saved." He tilted his head. "Then what do you want to be?" She walked to him, kneeled by his side, and whispered, "I want to be yours. Not as a rescued girl, but as your equal." Kale smiled. Not a warrior's smile, but a man's smile. A man who had found what he never thought he would. He touched her face. "You already are." That night she laid beside him. Not in fear, not in shame, but in peace. Her body warm against his, her heart steady. And when she closed her eyes, she remembered the wheel, the fire, the chains, and smiled, because she was no longer the girl they threw away. She was the woman who rose from the ashes, in the arms of a man who saw her worth, when no one else did.